instructions, then I'll introduce myself, and I'll have my colleagues introduce themselves. So, in this part of the competition, you are taking on a fictitious business identity, which we do not yet know. And we are assuming the fictitious identity of the executive board of the Dole Food Company, correct?
Yes.
So I want you to make sure that you communicate to all of us who you are and who we are before you begin. You're going to have 25 minutes. There's a 5-minute cushion if you need to use it as a buffer. And you're going to be describing the legal, financial, and ethical dimensions of a problem and recommending a solution that passes muster on all 3 counts. During the time, you will be uninterrupted. You have no idea how lucky you are, because I was a judge for a lot of years in the New York State court system, and nobody went uninterrupted. Not the Clarence Thomas of the court system. Okay, when you are finished, we are then going to ask you questions for 20 additional minutes. I'm going to start and then turn it over to my colleagues here. During Q&A, we stay in character, and you stay in character as well. A couple of very important things to keep in mind. The ethical aspects of your presentation are the most important, because this is a business ethics competition and not a business law or finance competition. You should describe the ethical elements in clear, practical, and common sense terms, i.e. plain English, if there is such a thing for highly educated individuals. Using technical philosophical terminology or basing your argument on religious or theological grounds is considered a major weakness. It results in a tremendous loss of points. Similarly, reading. You can have notes, but reading your notes or reading your PowerPoint in today's technology will also be considered a major mistake. During the presentation, each one of you will have a speaking role. I'm assuming that that's correct for all of you. Okay? So those, and then what I'm going to ask you to do is, if you give me your timer, we're going to set the timers for 25 minutes each.
Can I ask a question? So just on our role, executive board as in board of directors or management board?
That's a great specification. I would imagine management board. Management board?
Management board.
Okay, so we are like officers of the company.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Let me set this one for you. All right, so while I'm busy playing with technology here, and then all you have to do when we get started is to just hit this button that says start and stop.
Don't start yet.
Don't start yet, correct. Okay, so my name is Ruth Kraft. I retired from the New York State court system as a supervising judge for labor and employment in downstate New York. So I'm a specialist in all sorts of labor law, labor economics, and tax issues. And before that, I was a law professor at NYU. And taught and founded the business ethics curriculum at the Stern School of Business at NYU as well. And we'll go down the line.
My name is Bobby Kipp. I'm a partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I am not a lawyer. Trained as an accountant and was a financial auditor for many years, and then I was PwC's first, and actually our profession's first ethics officer for our firm and globally in the U.S. And now I'm a consultant in the same general area for PwC.
Good morning, I am Jim Arnold. I am from University of St. Thomas in Minneapolis, Minnesota, not the one in the Caribbean, which everyone seems to think.
You mean you don't have an affiliate down there?
I wish.
I think you need one.
I wish.
For those.
We'd be happy to help you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
We have lots of consultants here.
I teach in the management department. We filter in ethics and business ethics through everything that we teach at St. Thomas. We have a very large ethics department. However, we integrate it in everything they teach in the MBA program there. So welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are ready to get started. Okay.
Doesn't look like it.
Here, give it, I'll set it for you.
It's a philosophy major. How can he say
I
it's
know.
Philosophy major, economics minor.
Yeah, it is. You have to hit this button again. You have to know how they work. And of course, no two are ever the same to make it more interesting. You're on. Oh, you know what it did though? It set for 20, you need 25. All right, let's do that again.
So James is Curtis.
Yes, ma'am.
You're on.
Curtis or Curtis?
For the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to go with James.
It's
Sorry.
crossed off, James.
Sorry.
All right.
My apologies.
James has his Curtis. I'm over there.
Anyone else have a different name, Steve?
Anyone else with an alias? Pseudonym?
Just
Superhero?
Sean. Just Sean.
Just John. Okay. Jen.
Jane.
I go with Jenny, but
All right.
Okay.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for welcoming us here today. My name is Sam Long. Presenting with me are going to be Sean Johnson, Jennifer Meyer, and James Snicker. Together, we are representing Dole Food Company's corporate responsibility and sustainability team. We'll be presenting our findings on the topic of food waste to yourselves, Dole's executive board. Now, I'd like to take a minute to give you a little bit more background on who we are. Together, we are Dole Food Company. We are the single largest producer and grower and distributor of fresh fruits and vegetables in the entire world. We have a presence in more than 90 countries, and we sell over 200 products, including our signature fresh pineapples, bananas, lettuce, and spinach. Now, specifically, we are Dole's CRS team. We were introduced in 2005, and we were based out of Dole's EU headquarters due to the region's ability to predict upcoming trends in CRS. Our goal as a team is to maintain ethically and environmentally sound business practices at Dole without compromising the bottom line our shareholders have come to expect from us. Now, to set the mood here today, I'd like to take a moment to read a quote from the chairman of the board, Mr. David Murdoch. As a company, we have long enjoyed a coveted reputation for our ethical conduct in our business dealings, for our respect for the environment. We use our superior knowledge and exceptional resources to do what is right for our stockholder, customers, employees, consultants, suppliers, and host countries. This philosophy is integral to Dole's culture and guides its efforts. Given these strong convictions from the chairman of the board, our team finds it disheartening and perhaps even a little disillusioning that the Dole Food Company has done so little to speak out on, to even recognize the problem of food waste as it appears across the industry, and specifically here at Dole. We predict that the problem of food waste will present many opportunities and challenges for the Dole Food Company here in the coming years. Now, the hard numbers behind food waste can be rather difficult to swallow. About 1/3 of all food produced, that's 25% of the global caloric budget that we have every year. 1/3 of all food produced for human consumption goes to waste before it is consumed by people. That's $165 billion a year left on the table due to bad planning and poor logistics. We can do better. It's business 101 to run an efficient and effective business. Yet the food industry oftentimes runs anywhere from 25 to 40% at losses. There are 50 million Americans, that includes 16 million children, who are labeled as food insecure. These are families that live and work where Dole does business. Through an alliance with Feeding America, Dole has an opportunity to tackle food waste in our own backyard by doing nothing other than disposing of our food waste that we already produce in a different manner. Now, the problem of food waste goes beyond the economic and social spheres and enters into the environmental. According to the EPA, American landfills are comprised of 97% food waste. Now, this food waste, when it enters a landfill, it breaks down anaerobically and produces methane. Methane gas is 21 times more effective at causing climate change than carbon emissions. However, Dole only looks at our carbon emissions footprint as a metric to report, not methane. We like to think of ourselves as the industry leader for green business. However, our facade is being questioned by consumers who believe that we don't practice what we preach, and competitors who believe that we are literally letting profit rot. On that note, our team has identified 3 elements of the Dole brand that we believe will have the most impact on tackling food waste in the industry and at Dole. These elements: production, consumer and industry relations, and product labeling. Now, on the production side of things, we've identified gleaning to be a viable and profitable business practice for Dole. Every year, tons of perfectly edible food are left in the fields after harvest. This is because the food does not meet the high standards that we as Dole have for our food to go to market. Through partnering with Feed America, we will be able to not only reduce our overproduction, but generate goodwill in the communities where we do business. Now, on that note, we need all the goodwill we can get. In November 2015, down in Salinas Valley, California, a waste production plant was captured by a local news crew dumping 10 tons of Dole labeled spinach. That was that image I showed you earlier. All right. In order to avoid a PR backlash for years to come, Dole needs to get ahead of the ball. We need to begin speaking out, looking for opportunities to form alliances in the industry, and with groups such as the Food Waste Reduction Alliance. If we fail to do this, if we fail to be an early voice in the dialogue on food waste, we're going to miss an amazing opportunity. Lastly, on the issue of labeling, our team recommends a brand-wide reimagining of the standard best by and sell-by dates of our products. By educating consumers and retailers, we believe that we'll be able to generate brand loyalty that will result in higher sales for our products, and eventually help us solve the issue of food waste further down the product line. I'm going to hand off the presentation over to my teammate Sean, who will give you the ethical framework that we use to arrive at our recommendations.
Thank you, Sam. So, I'm Sean, as just introduced. I want to discuss Dole and its relationship with capital. So we normally think of capital as simply being these essential financial aspects that we can point to very easily. And to a certain extent, that is in fact what we're going to be discussing. But I want to give a more ethical slant to these questions of capital. And so for the sake of that discussion, there is a common metric within the industry known as the triple bottom line. The triple bottom line is a reform brought to the concept of a bottom line in order to help make more ethical decisions in particular areas, and in particular the two focused on our people and planet. So profits, people, and planet are our three focuses. What are these? Profit is the more common bottom line. It's the strict financial one. People is a consideration particularly of the branding aspects. So the way in which our company appears to those outside of it, and the way in which we interact with those people, the way in which our activities affect them, and in a way that will ultimately come back around to the way that they want to interact with us. Planet is the environmental aspect. The environment can include a variety of things, plants, animals, the minerals of the property that we actually own. So what the triple bottom line attempts to do is give solid numbers to each of these three things in order that a company can move forward on the basis of those, of the maximization of all of those forms of capital, rather than simply trying to get the biggest number on your one singular bottom line. So that's a beginning, but in order to really address the issues that we're talking about, there is a pyramid that is recommended by the EPA. What this does is it attempts to put in order what precisely we should be doing with our food. Excess food should ideally be dealt with by simple source reduction. So if we're producing a bunch of food that no one is eating, ideally just don't produce that food. Banning that, feeding hungry people, second ideal, going to feed animals, industrial uses, composting. And then if absolutely nothing else can be done, then it goes in the landfill. So this is the ideal. This is what we want to aim for, is to try and make sure that all of our resources go towards making, either reducing our overproduction, which saves us money in the long run, or it goes towards feeding hungry people, or these other uses, which all of which, one, look good in terms of the effects that it has on the communities, and it also ultimately can save us profit in a more immediate way. So in order to achieve that, what I want to bring in is this concept of the land ethic. So the land ethic is a not as endorsed, particularly in the business community, moral framework, but it's been around for several years. And what the land ethic tries to do is establish a set of moral principles governing the interaction between an individual and the environment, essentially. You can think about this in terms of other business relationships, right? So the business relationship between the company as a whole and its shareholders, or between its employees, or the communities in which it operates. All we're adding is an additional ethic, this land ethic, which attempts to tie the two together. So what does this land ethic actually recommend? It recommends that we view the environment as something that is complex, is difficult to immediately tell how it's going to actually work, whether or not something that we happen to do is going to cause some sort of environmental problem, is going to, in the case of overproduction, rob the soil of vital nutrients, which means that over time, overproduction actually saps the soil of the materials necessary for it to actually be able to grow the crops that we want to grow. And in addition to that, all of that overproduction ultimately produces methane gas, as previously discussed, and that methane gas contributes to climate change. And climate change ultimately represents something that could seriously damage the value of our pre-existing land holdings. So the primary consideration is that the land should be, as much as possible, left to do what it does naturally. And we should only utilize it for the sake of achieving the particular ends that we want to achieve. Just enough production, just enough food to be able to sell it at the demand that we have. And that, again, comes in by maximizing the amount sold, by finding different uses for it, and making sure that overproduction is used, again, for other uses, for the garnering of other forms of capital, branding, and such. So how are all of these going to work together? The land ethic is ultimately going to tie into the triple bottom line in the environmental aspect, right? So in that planet circle of our three circles. It's going to inform how we're going to conceive of environmental capital. And then the triple bottom line, ultimately, is designed so that we can grow in a more sustainable manner. Rather than just maximizing the number each year, we have a more long-term conception of what our land is actually worth and what it can ultimately be used for in the future if we preserve it, if we use it in a way that makes it so that future generations and future iterations of the company itself can use that land. And all of those are ultimately going to tie into Dole's general ethical practices and to the end of increasing efficiency, long-term profitability, and of course our branding, making sure that our image improves, making sure that we have good relationships with consumers. So all of that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Ginny here, who's going to tell you about the legal aspects of what I just suggested.
Thank you, Sean. So, as he just mentioned, I'll be looking at the legal outlook for our practical recommendations and for the problem of food waste in general. So it's important to note that there aren't that many laws regarding food waste in regards to our position as producers currently. However, there has been a lot of recent legal and political scrutiny about food waste pointed towards the roles of consumers and the roles of retailers. So as we move forward with our new practices, we want to remember our inherent business relationship with our consumers and with our retailers. We don't want any of our new practices to cause any sort of legal hardship or legal burden on those who consume our products and those who represent us at the checkout line. But first, let's look at the current legal situation as we are as producers. So looking at best buy and sell by dates, around the world there's really a multitude of different ideas surrounding the issue. Here in the United States, federal law only regulates that a best buy or sell by date be printed on infant formula. There are multiple state laws that do require best buy or sell by dates on other products such as dairy products, meat, or poultry. And then there are a lot of laws sort of around the world that do similar things with dairy products, meat, and poultry. Now, obviously, we do not sell any dairy products, we don't sell any meat, we don't sell any poultry. So these don't really apply to us. So the one regulation we should be paying attention to is the upcoming bill in the California Assembly. The California Assembly Bill 2725 is the most stringent food waste law or the most stringent best buy and sell by date up to date. It has a lot of public support in California and around the United States. It's expected to pass this June, and even if it doesn't pass, if we implement our best buy and sell by date sort of reimagining, it'll garner that same support. So this California bill would pertain to our products such as our lettuce and our packaged produce. And because we both sell and package a lot of our products in California, this is the one that would affect us most directly. Our recommendation to standardize our best buy and sell by dates and to provide information as to what sell by means was crafted with this bill in mind and the public support for it in mind. Now, when we look at donations and gleaning, we have a few major laws that we need to understand. Here in the United States, we have the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Donation Act. In Canada, there's the Food Donation Act. In Australia, the Volunteers in Food and Other Donors Protection from Liability Act. And in Italy, the Good Samaritan Law. Now, all of these laws provide protection from liability resulting from donated products. So as long as any of our donations are made in good faith, which means that we don't know of any sort of inconsistencies in our products, we can't be held legally accountable for any harm resulting from these donations. These same acts additionally apply to gleaning. We can't be held legally accountable for any organizations or any individuals that come in and glean our fields and in any way are harmed by doing so. Now, as a side note, because Dole is headquartered in the United States, any of these donations that we make can be used for additional tax deductions under Title 26, U.S. Code 170, Section 8.3. And finally, our recommendation to join the Food Waste Reduction Alliance doesn't have any sort of legal implications or repercussions in any way. They do have a set of best practices that they wish their members to embody and use, but our new practices will embody these ideals. So those laws that I just talked about pertain to our position as producers. Now, obviously, you can see that we aren't really heavily regulated in terms of food waste. However, food waste has become an upcoming issue in regards to retailers and consumers. So while these laws that I'm about to discuss don't directly apply to us as producers, they're important to look at to understand what retailers and what consumers have to deal with and to understand the shifting views toward food waste today. So I mentioned the upcoming bill in California. Like I said, it does regulate standardization of best buy dates. It additionally requires retailers in California to donate any food they receive that don't meet these standards. Seattle recently enacted a few municipal codes that prohibit both residential areas and businesses from putting food in regular trash. The EPA and the USDA have instituted what they call a food waste challenge that encourages businesses, individuals, and organizations to reduce food waste. And while this isn't legally binding in any sort of way, it does represent a governmental attitude towards reducing food waste. France recently enacted a law prohibiting supermarkets from throwing away food, and that law has a lot of support in France and around the EU. In fact, France is now urging other members of the EU to adopt similar laws. In South Korea is important to look at because they have some of the most stringent food waste laws in the world. The Marine Environment Management Act is just one of the few regulations surrounding the topic of food waste. The United Nations additionally recently instituted a global initiative called Save Food. And once again, while this isn't legally binding in any sort of way, it does represent an international urge to reduce the problem of food waste. So these are just a few of the acts and legislation surrounding food waste. And once again, while they don't pertain to us as producers, they show shifting global attitudes towards the problem of food waste. And these ever-changing laws could soon shift to our position as producers. So we need to start making changes in our practices to get ahead of any future legal repercussions that could come our way. Now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague James to cover the financial section.
Thanks, Jen. Hi everyone, I'm James, and I'll be covering the financial aspects of Dole and food waste as it concerns to our proposals. In business, it can be said, when looking at Dole's food waste, we see that there's significant potential in profit that's being left on the table. Profit that under normal circumstances would normally be okay, but we can't find those circumstances existing. It's common entrepreneurial sense that you want to have your company run as efficiently as possible in order to maximize profit and to get a good return on investment. It can be said that when you produce a surplus of products, so much so that there are products lying in the field being unused, that your production process is inefficient. You're probably overproducing. One solution we feel to this problem is to actually change the label on the expiration label on products produced by Dole. We feel what happens when you put this date on products is customers get stigmatized that one product is better than another based on the date. So for example, if I'm going to a grocery store and I'm buying a gallon of milk, I walk up to the refrigerator, open the door, see there's 2 gallons of milk left. Now you see one date, you usually choose which one has the furthest expiration date. While that normally makes sense from the consumer standpoint, from a product standpoint, both those gallons of milk are probably still good and can still be used. So that 1 gallon of milk gets left and then goes to waste because of an expiration date that may or may not actually be true. We understand overproduction is a fact of business in order to regulate inventory levels. We're not recommending that you actually change production levels. We're recommending you keep them the same. We feel changing the labels will have a quasi-butterfly effect, and that more sales will happen at the current production level, meaning a greater percentage of product produced at that level will get sold versus left in the refrigerator and expired. This change doesn't cost a lot of money either. You trip down to the factory to adjust how the product is made. It's not reinventing an entire marketing campaign. It's not changing your product massively. It's a small change, but we feel it's going to have a big effect. This, however, is not the only benefit that Dole can stand to gain from changing the product label. There's actually a lot of benefits in public image too. Probably the biggest benefit Dole can gain is an improvement in public image. In 2003, in New Zealand, Dole was hit with a very big greenwashing scandal that caused a good media frenzy, and their image hasn't really fully recovered since. As any business guy will tell you, how your customers view your company is extremely important. It can affect sales, it can affect every kind of aspect of business, and it's not good for business. In recent times, people have taken notice more now of the environment than they have in past decades. They're taking notice of who's being responsible, who's not. It's a savvy business move and a good opportunity for Dole to take advantage of this, because they can then take it to the PR, take it to marketing, and say, hey, let's get this out there, let's get the word out there that we're changing our ways, we're becoming a responsible corporate citizen. We're making strides to help the environment. People respond to that, respond to it well, and that can help your bottom line. To summarize, we can perform the label and become a better corporate citizen. This is like I said before, this is proven time and time again that how consumers view your company can affect your bottom line and affect your finances. In order to conclude our presentation, I'm going to hand it once back over to our Sam, my colleague Sam, and he's going to take us out.
You can't sell anything to a dead planet. That's about as common sense as it gets. As Sean mentioned, we need to preserve our land. It is our capital. We're perfectly capable of living off the interest of our capital by maintaining our land, by reducing the amount of food waste, by reducing our methane emissions, and focusing in on how we can actually produce the same amount that we do now, 20 years down the road, 50 years down the road, when our population swells to 9.5 billion. As Jennifer mentioned, we are in an excellent position legally. We have basically nothing to worry about here in the US and globally where we do business. As Curtis mentioned, we have a few things to gain from reimagining our brand and from avoiding a PR nightmare. As we're already a little bit over time, I'll go ahead and wrap that up.
No, you actually have 4 more minutes. You're in the extended period.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I hope that you, as our executive board, take these recommendations to heart. I believe that the facts we presented clearly demonstrate that the problem of food waste is going to be something that the Dole brand has to recognize and deal with in the next few years. And the sooner the better. Thank you.
No, yours is going to be, could you give me yours?
Yeah, I
All
turned
right.
it off.
Okay. So now we're going to,
There is no timer, says the philosopher.
I love that. That's funny. What is time?
It's irrelevant.
But it's all relevant,
We've had those
right.
dinner table discussions.
I like that, it's all
Facts.
relevant, right? Sounds like the political campaign this year. Okay, here you go. All right, so I only have a couple of questions here. James, you said that the expiration label can stigmatize customers, correct?
Yes,
If
ma'am.
they see one being shorter than the other. So your plan was, it sounded like that you were going to change the label and somehow extend the time table within which, let's say, the spinach can be sold. Is that correct?
My recommendation, to be clear, was to actually remove the label as a whole.
Oh, you never said that. Okay, so you want to remove the...
This is.
We're removing expiration labels.
Yes.
And
We're removing
standardizing.
the expiration
And then
data.
And then-
Yeah, and
Sub-line.
so we're removing the term expires on or.
Okay, so here's my question to you. Isn't that going to be a public relations nightmare? Somehow I see the Daily News on page 1, on the front page, saying green scandal, no expiration date, don't duping the customer.
There will still be a Best By date, but the Best By
Okay.
dates are to be standardized, and there's also going to be a separate Sell By date. So you'll see all 3 of those. No.
No? Okay.
You guys want, wait, if you guys want to like.
Talk amongst yourselves.
That's okay.
Go,
So,
Janine.
what we mean by the standardization of a Best By date means that we're getting rid of the sort of extraneous terms sell by and
We're going to have
expire.
one date.
We're going to have one term, Best By. And then we're going to include a, I guess, sort of blurb after that saying, you know, we're giving information as to what does Best By mean, and encouraging.
What type sauce are you going to put this in on my spinach, plastic bag of spinach?
Anything more complicated would simply go on the website, and
Right,
the
so
consumer
we're
would be directed to
encouraging
go
our
to the
consumer
website.
to go to our website to learn
So the
what
little
exactly
old lady,
Best By
so the
means.
little old lady who, and there are some beyond our age group who actually don't know what
Not
the
many left.
internet is. Not very many left, my mother may she rest in peace. You know, it's not going onto your website. Aren't you doing somebody like that?
Can I interject? As far as that particular demographic goes, the little old lady, I feel like that might.
They're in the waste landfill. They're about to go in the
Well,
landfill.
those are individuals who might already be more willing to use food that we would consider inedible. And
What?
now, allow me to
My
clarify.
mother, the cook of all time, is going to use inedible food?
I believe she would have a wider window of what you might consider inedible and what you might throw away. She might go ahead and use that.
You mean
So-
because the depression generation doesn't waste the way the kids do?
It does.
Okay, but do you
If I-
see the public relations nightmare
If I
that you
may.
think you're going to foist upon us?
If I may, so the sell by, the Best By, and the expiration and all of those labels currently are, 1, very inconsistent, and 2, basically meaningless. They don't mean different things. There's no you know,
Okay.
they have implications. I feel like when I go to the store and I look at a gallon of milk and it says Best By versus Sell By, I interpret that as meaning 2 different things. So the idea is if there's one label, and if that label is, then we can give it some degree of this is what this label means, even if that's very basic. then that is an improvement over the current way that things exist. It's actually giving more information to the consumers.
But, so can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
Just to follow on. So I'm aware of some of what you said, and you were right. There's sort of no standardization to it, there's no rules around it. But James, you described, which I agree with, consumer behavior, right? Our normal behavior would say, I'm gonna pick the thing that's gonna last the longest in my refrigerator. So even a standardization to one date, sell by, best by, whatever it is, with education that says this is what's not, is not necessarily gonna change that behavior. So I don't know if you all considered maybe there's an incentive or some way to encourage consumer behavior that would then encourage me to buy the older thing, then it won't go to waste. So, you know what I mean? Because that's the fundamental problem.
And speaking of waste, I believe you said, I believe you said that we weren't going to, you're not recommending to us to leave more land fallow, but we would continue to produce at the same rate.
Right.
Whereas you said, I think, that Sean or Sam?
Sean. This one's Sam.
You said, I took my glasses off.
It's fine.
You said that that by constantly cultivating the land, we erode its ultimate usefulness. So I mean, there's a little dissonance here.
There's
so.
two forms of productions, right? So there's the production on the end that ends up on the market shelf, and then there's the production at the end of the fields. So one of the things that we're interested in is reducing the degree to which there's waste at the fields, right? So reducing the degree which, and this happens. This happens on farms. Is you have a peach farm, and then there are peaches that simply don't look pretty enough to go to the market. So what do we do with those? They don't get donated. They don't get chopped up and put into salsa, which is actually a thing that happens in some places. They get thrown on the ground and then they rot, right? And that brings some of the nutrients back to the soil, but not all of the nutrients back to the soil. So it's a waste. So you can maintain production on one end at the end of having it at the store on the shelf and still continue to produce that much, but changing the way that you are organized so that you can use your resources more efficiently at the farm end, which is the end that Dole primarily is on.
Now, isn't it a fact that the government subsidizes this waste? You didn't get into that at all.
I'm not aware of that. If it is the case, it would
In the
probably
corn
be inconsistent.
industry,
It would probably be inconsistent.
Yeah.
Dole is an international company, so it's not necessarily the case that we would be getting that subsidy everywhere.
Fair.
I'm going to jump in here. I'm going to change the subject just a little bit. Well, sort of on subject. A couple of things. Now, you're talking about jumping on the donation bandwagon, the gleaning bandwagon. A major cost of this kind of farming is logistics and getting it to us over here from whatever country you're in. So there's a huge cost increase to us, but we're not getting anything back because we're donating. What are we going to do about that?
That's a great question. When I think of running these gleaning efforts, a place that comes to mind would be California, to start. There are millions and millions of hungry families there, and we have tons of farms right down the street from them. This is not going to be some global effort when we can do it here. So let's think small before we try and think about the logistical problems of shipping our excess food around the world. Let's just try and ship it down the road. I think that could...
What percent of our production is international versus here in the U.S.?
The actual percent, I do not know.
Okay, I think it's pretty high.
Yeah.
And in countries where, yes, I agree with the California thing makes a total amount of sense, but I don't think that's where all the food waste is. Okay, number two, and in feedback, I'll give you a chance to
Absolutely.
give you some more information. We're kind of on a time crunch here. You said that you didn't want to burden the retailers with any of this, with any of the plans here. What would be the burden on retailers that you think that you couldn't overcome and maybe turn into a positive?
So, what I was talking about there with the burden mostly referred to the California Assembly Bill, where it has a very specific regulation for the best by dates, which we're planning on implementing. And then it also requires that any supermarket in California that receives products that aren't labeled to the standard, those products must be donated.
Okay.
So we wouldn't want to send these supermarkets products that aren't labeled correctly.
Is that
That
happening
would
make
now?
it-
also on them. I'm sorry?
Is that happening, did the law take care of that issue, or?
It's currently in the assembly. It's supposed
Because
to
of the
pass
issue.
in June.
Okay.
In June.
Thank you.
I think most of our customers anyway, the big customers like Walmart or anything, they have date standards. They're not gonna buy
Yeah.
something that isn't gonna be able to get there in time to sit on the
Right.
shelf long enough for them
Yeah.
to buy it because it
Mhm.
costs them too much time and effort. I have a question. So, you guys are the CSR department, and forgive me for saying this, but you're a cost center, right? You're running the business, and we're producing a lot of money for our shareholders. So you guys all sitting there on your high horse saying that triple bottom line is what we should be, how we should be running the business, and suggesting we're doing a bad job running the business. I'm a little insulted by that. What I would like to know is, I agree, there's lots of waste. It's sort of an inherent cost to business. But have you guys captured how much money we lose on food waste, and what's a realistic goal, and why do you think that's a realistic goal? Because getting to zero is not a realistic goal.
I think a realistic goal would be to do what the EPA and the USDA has recommended,
Okay.
and that's by reducing food waste by 50% by 2030.
50% of our current food waste?
By
But we're
2030.
actually one of the lower food waste. You know, compared to Conagra or some of our competitors,
Right.
we're actually pretty lower than our competitors. So reducing by 50% may not be realistic.
ConAgra is a member of the Food Waste Reduction Alliance. They've
Mhm.
already instituted practices to reduce food waste in their company.
And if they set a public goal to reduce, because, you know, frankly, if there's public goals on this, obviously it's part of our reputation. I think you certainly made that point, Sean. That's important to us, and we know you guys sitting here, high horse in the CSR department. We use this for our brand.
I'll make a small comment on that. I feel like we might not have gotten this across well enough in the presentation. All of our recommendations will actually improve our bottom line,
Okay.
particularly gleaning. We receive tax credits for that. None of this is necessarily going to run up costs. If anything, it's going to increase our profit at the end of the year. I feel like that's something we really need to take away from this. You call us a cost center, and I can agree with that. We are kind of the dog with no teeth that you just have to keep throwing money at. But in this particular instance, we are offering you money that has just been
How
left on the
much?
table.
How much? From the tax credits?
How much on the tax credits?
It really depends on how much we donate.
Well, based on our current donations, how much of a tax credit are we getting?
We're not donating.
We're not donating at all.
Right.
Okay, and if we donate 10%, I mean, do we have some metrics here
I can't.
that we can then use to figure out how much money we need to spend on our public relations program to make sure that this one label thing can be spun in our benefit and not bite us in a very serious way?
Yeah, the donations will cost us some money.
Yeah, they're
We
gonna
have
cost
to-
us money,
We have
yeah.
to package it up, we gotta ship it, whatever we're gonna do, right?
I believe currently the tax law is written as to where you can get, I believe it's 50% of fair market value for goods you've donated. There may be a cap on that, I'm not sure, but
And as far as these gleaning efforts go, the way this is typically done, we will partner with a group, a charity organization, who will actually come themselves to our fields after we're done with the harvest. They'll grab the food. We don't have to worry about packaging it up. It's almost about as free as it can get.
Yeah, I mean, our customers donate. I was just a volunteer at the Greater Boston Food Bank last week, and I can tell you these,
yeah.
you know, pallets and pallets of stuff that came from Walmart and from Wegmans. And
Right.
that. So they at least on their end donate. And you're saying we don't donate at all, Jenny?
Yes, I'm
Wow.
saying that
Why have
Dole
we never
as the
donated?
company does not donate.
Why haven't you ever recommended donations before?
We're only
Are you
in 2005.
They were afraid of us.
And it's kind of shocking. We're a decade-old team. You know, this consumer corporate responsibility and sustainability standard is only introduced in 2005.
Yeah.
So we're getting the ball rolling. We're trying our hardest here.
So can I ask you a question? So I think you did a really nice job laying out the ethical framework and how triple bottom line. No. I have a question. And how it fits together with the food hierarchy from EPA and the land ethic Are you suggesting that we have that balance wrong? A, are you suggesting people, planet, profits, which is a common CSR framework, that they're all equal? Because I have responsibilities to our shareholders.
Right. I don't think that the idea is necessarily that all of these things are going to be equal for the purposes of the corporation, but the idea is that these are all different forms of value that the corporation needs to pay attention to. And in particular, the way that our current practices work, it can cause problems in
It's
through
like
other
people,
domains.
I mean, it's like profits, people, planet.
Yeah, and then those need to be enlarged just slightly.
Has I been on this board since the year of the flood, and I don't remember ever hearing the word greenwashing until today.
That was a fun little incident down in New Zealand. We had a label called the ethical choice label, and that had nothing, absolutely nothing to back it up.
So nothing ethical about the ethical choice.
Nothing ethical about the
label.
ethical choice, at least in hard numbers that we were ever provided the New Zealand government. I don't know exactly what entity down there deals with
So in
that.
other words, it was a greenwashing scandal in New Zealand, a
Yes.
country how many thousands of miles away, but it never hit the LA Times?
Apparently.
Okay.
It affected them. And if it happened there, it could definitely begin to happen other ways. We're trying to cut off the flood here a little bit.
With the changing opinions, particularly in Europe, right? So this is beginning to become on the radar of various different organizations, which means we could get accusations.
If we wait around, it's going to get worse.
It seems to me our biggest opportunity here, we can affect what we can control of our own production and what we do with waste and everything, but, is our partnerships with our relationships with our customers, like I said, the Walmarts, the big Cisco's, Aramarks, et cetera, Marriott's, we're to Marriott. What kinds of solutions should we be thinking about there that might actually be good for our relationship with our customers, good for our PR, and save us some money?
That's a good question. One of the ideas that you have floated in terms of changing the way that the dates work was to provide two different, there's the label on the particular item, which is going to be the Best Buy label, which we're going to provide some information to the consumer about, providing a then sell-by date, which isn't necessarily on the product itself, right, to help those companies make a decision about when they remove a particular product from the shelf. And again, having those dates more standardized so that a company doesn't have to go through an entire batch of milk and make vague decisions about when this one is bad or that one is bad. Or
So it's like the labeling and education, you say, pointed at our customers.
Yeah.
I don't mean the end consumer, I mean the
So there's-
customers are really the large.
Yeah, and so those customers of ours can then turn around to their customers and say, look, this is a product that has a standardized label, and then they can also have a better idea of when something's actually going to be bad and be able to move it from their shelves more easily.
Part of your recommendation, and this came towards the end, is we have the ability to now market or state that we're now helping the environment. That sounds like we're the last ones in the world to help the environment, because everybody else is using that now. That's the thing to be using, and it's been that way for a number of years. How would you recommend positioning so we don't sound like we're last on the game and have it work against us?
We deal with food. I feel like food is one of the most directly connected things you can buy to the healthy environment. If things start going south and climate change begins to really pick up, which it might, the first thing you're going to notice is that your food doesn't look as good as it used to. There's not as great a variety. I believe that it's not at all wrong of us to try and get this green image going. I don't think anybody's going to seriously question us on that front.
I also think, so like we mentioned, there is a lot of focus on this topic of food waste and on the environment. But realistically speaking, most of the focus on the environment now is on carbon emissions and on factories and smog and all of that stuff. And if we come out, there is focus on methane emissions and stuff like that, but if we come out as a big proponent of reducing methane emissions and reducing food waste, it is a topic in the forefront, but if we join this that movement, we can bring it more to the attention of the common man.
And two, if I can add very quickly
Sure.
to that point, one of the suggestions was this land ethic, which attempts to go a little bit beyond just simply a label of environmentalism. So I think that that is not something that is as widely embraced in the business world. versus something like the triple bottom line. So if we moved forward on this conception of land ethic and we were able to communicate that in a way that was kind of punchy, then I think that it would work pretty well.
Okay.
I'd be curious, we talk about greenhouse gas gets a lot of attention. You mentioned the sort of methane produced by food waste that stays in the ground, it stays on the ground, et cetera. Water, so the overproduction cost of water,
Yes.
water cost and environmental water is the #1 scarce resource right in the world. That's got to be costing us a boatload, no pun intended, of lost profit. And so I guess as we think about this question of overproduction, now listen, I'll tell you, as us as the management team running this company, I'd rather overproduce a little bit and not be short anywhere in the world, because we make a lot of money, and the fact that our margins are 50% on all of our products, I just made that up. If we overproduce a little bit, but we're the ones on the shelf and we have demand for our product, so we got to get that balance right.
Right.
Sorry, I don't know what the question was.
And the tax credit too.
Yeah, for sure. So I think the question was really around water and the cost of water as a scarce resource and environmental impact. And then how do we get this balance right between what you call overproduction, which is in some degree intentional. Plus, we don't
It's
know what our
necessary.
products are going to, you don't know what the weather's going to do every year.
Can I respond to the?
Yeah, sorry.
So as you said,
You'd be like Bernie.
a little bit of overproduction. The numbers I said earlier were anywhere from 25 to 40%.
Yep.
I don't think that's little. I think few other business sectors could operate at that kind of loss before the consumer actually gets the finished product. And what was the other element? Oh, water.
Yeah, water.
The CRS.
If I can, going again back to the point that was brought up somewhat between me and Curtis, right? The idea of maintaining our shelf presence, but simply utilizing more of the product that we actually produce on the land to sell it to market would reduce our water usage significantly, I would imagine. So emphasizing again, maintaining the amount that we're able to put, bananas in shelves basically, but changing the way that we use our farming practices in order to make sure that any excess, we don't produce excess product that simply can't be sold, or making sure that it goes to some other end. That you wanted to say something.
All right, no, because we are out of time.
Sorry.
So now we've got to do the
Now we
feedback.
take off our masks?
Yes, now we take off our masks. Within the first 30 seconds, the word, if not earlier, the words land ethic came up, which was very intriguing to me. It came out, it was the first thing I wrote down. Do you know that it took 10 minutes to define land ethic? So it was like a dangling participle out there for 10 minutes, listening to all this background about the food not being used, etc., the waste levels, the landfills, the methanes. I'm thinking mad cow disease here because I'm in Boston. I love Boston legal. It took 10 minutes for you to define land ethic. Honestly, because you're going to have a 10-minute tomorrow and you're going to have a 90-second. You need to get that concept out and defined within your first minute, easily. And in the 90 seconds, you need to have it out in that first 10 seconds. Okay, we are preaching land ethic. What is land ethic? Okay, seriously, because if this is a real business presentation, what is the statistic? Is it you have the first 30 seconds or 60 seconds to convince a board? 20, even worse. Okay, we have ADD in the younger
Used to be 30.
It used to be 30. You see that? It's
Attention
shrinking.
spans are shrinking.
And that's with our phones off.
Correct, with our phones on. You had 20 seconds. It took you 10 minutes to get to the definition. Seriously. And I was dying for that definition because I didn't know what it meant, and I thought this is going to frame my whole the way I'm going to analyze what data you're presenting to me. I cannot emphasize that enough. The second thing I want to emphasize also, and this again goes to communication, is we had real moral and beyond moral confusion, real confusion as to what's going on with this label business. Are we changing the label? Are we pulling it off altogether? And what it really turned out is we're going to have a label with one metric on it, one date. Okay, again, first 10 seconds out. This is what we're going to do. Why is it important to do this? That produces moral clarity. Of course, we're not supposed to use these philosophical terms, but that's the point. You want to create clarity for the consumer because clarity creates trust. okay? In the same way, saying that if we have this excess production, we're not going to cut consumption, our population is growing, we always want to be on top of that and have product available. We are now going to donate to people who need this food. And by the way, there's a good bottom line in it because we get this outrageous tax credit. This is stuff that needed to be out there at the get-go, out of the starting gate. That came up in a question. Okay, we did not know or understand, I think, and I think we're pretty bright people, what you plan to do with those labels specifically until the Q&A. We did not know what greenwashing meant until late in the Q&A, and we didn't know that the scandal happened to be in New Zealand and did not cross these shores, okay? And that it's a conceivable risk for us. So I think there was a tremendous lack of definition here. And so if I'm looking at this program, you know, I didn't get a good idea of the financial, you know, what were the bottom line numbers, because that always comes out here. We've got bills that are pending, so we've got an uncertain regulatory environment, which admittedly, my son lives in Seattle, they're garbage police. The garbage is divided 6 different ways, or 7 at this point. What is our goal? What is our expectation as to savings? How do we not blow this into a public relations disaster? Okay, in terms of our labeling, none of that came out until we got into Q&A. So I think by the end of the Q&A, we had a much stronger sense of what it was you were trying to convey to us and how that might be in our best interests. But it seemed like we couldn't adopt. We were going to need to send you back or bring in a whole bunch of other teams and say, build the foundation for us so we can make a decision. We couldn't make a decision based on what was presented. It was too amorphous.
Yeah, I think this follows up on what Ruth is saying, is that anytime you're making a presentation, start by looking at who your audience is. And that will tell you what they want to know. And in the case of an executive board, you can make the assumption that we've got somebody from sales, marketing, legal, finance, accounting, operations. Now you realize that if I am on this board and I have my role, this is where my interest lies. And so if I'm an ops, for instance, if I'm in operations, you got to include something for me. And then something for each person. We've got our legal people here, et cetera. So there was a lot left on the table that I'm not sure addressed a lot of what people said, or with what they were looking for. I thought one of the most interesting pieces was that methane, the methane piece, 21%, it's more effective than carbon. Wow, that's cool.
Wow.
I might have gone back to that a couple times.
Yeah.
All of a sudden that said to me, holy crap.
I wrote down, get down and get out in front of that.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah,
that would have been a
that's
very good
huge.
framing issue for you also.
Yeah, and you grabbed all of us. I mean, if we weren't so careful, we would look at each other and gone, really?
Holy shit. Well, they do that in capture in the beef industry. That's a whole different issue. They capture and
Yeah, and there, I would like to hear a little bit of, just tell us a little bit about what our competitors are doing, what you can figure out there. What's Chiquita up to? What's ConAgra? What's Cargill? What are they doing? Let's just hear, because we want to know. We're always up against them.
And then we found out that ConAgra has adopted this already, right? And it's like, oh my God, you know. Uh-oh.
Yeah, now
That's
we're
a big
in real
out.
trouble.
We're in real trouble, yeah.
So, clean up out of here. First of all, good topic. You guys
Really?
are well prepared.
Wow,
You
I learned a
know,
lot.
thank you for doing it. We're giving you sort of the areas that maybe you can focus on and little good cop, bad cop here. So some really good things, I think. I think your slides actually were very effective.
Yeah, I like
So the graphics,
pyramid.
the pyramid's good.
The pyramid, the Venn diagram was very nice.
The gears, I think the
The
fact that
gears.
your framework fit things together, that was.
Especially because the ethics part of the
Yeah.
year, the profit part of the year was the biggest part. Well,
Yeah.
no, the ethics part was the biggest.
Well, so
No,
that
it's a
all of those were ethical, but it was the
Yeah.
goal ethics, the general ethics was the biggest
Yeah,
thing.
that was the big one.
And then
That was cool.
I did the there was the red was going through, so the profits
Right.
were red, and then the
Yeah,
dole,
so
the
so
dole
there's
generosity.
some
I like
really
that.
good things
I
you
love
guys
that.
were
That-
prepared, I think, in a presentation. You know, if any one of you kind of stumbles up a little bit at any point in the way, you're a team. Jump in and help each other. Don't let your colleagues hang. It's hard, as you all know. So I would just, you know, that stuff you just practice will get you better at that. I would say, to your point, I think knowing the audience, I was being the tough guy thing. I do a lot of work with, I do some work in the CSR space, and absolutely CSR departments, you get the people sitting on this side going, all you're doing is costing me money. And now you're insulting me? Seriously?
Yeah.
Who the hell are you to insult me? I'm running the business and I'm paying your paychecks. Seriously, very, very
happens
important.
all the time.
And it happens all the time. And I do think, just to what my colleagues have already said, I think the idea of being clearer on what is our solution and how does it solve the ethical issue that we have, get that up front, and then the rest can go as sort of supporting. But overall, you know.
Yeah, and seriously,
Yeah.
between today and tomorrow, take what we said to heart. Look at your presentation for tomorrow. See if you're leading with a question, if you're defining quickly. Make sure that you don't lose the time. You know, capitalize on those, on that first 30 seconds in particular.
When I was doing the research for the financial statements are not available to the public because Dole's private. So would you have any recommendations on how to shape your argument, not having access?
And there
to
hasn't
those?
been any investigative reporting, for example?
No, that we can find.
That was partly why there was so little numbers in my part of the presentation.
Did you look at ConAgra or the other companies that are public?
No, no.
Okay, because you might have been able to do that and say, well, you know.
Chiquita.
Interpret the, play
So
the data game.
like an industry perspective,
Yes, the industry is doing this, and they're spending X percentage, or they're getting X tax gain. We aren't, we haven't taken advantage of it. We now have a basis for doing good and making out well for ourselves at the same time. You know, so if you don't.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think if you emphasize, especially knowing that we're the audience, you
get by.
I hate to say you downplay a little bit the sort of inherent and altruistic goals of, you know, a better impact on environment and reducing waste and better for people and people with hunger and everything else. But I'm going to react to the money piece. And
Bottom
so
line.
you say, look, this is a win-win, right? It's a
Right.
win-win. We're going to help people. We're gonna
Help the environment.
help the environment, and we're gonna increase our bottom line. Do you want
Right.
it? I'm sitting here going, why would I not sign up?
Yeah.
Everybody excited,
That's
yeah,
easy.
everybody's happy now.
And my
Right.
PR, and by the way, if I market it right, my public reputation is better.
And all the stakeholders are happy.
So you could get
Matters.
you couldn't get public information on finance, but you could get public information to find out they're not donating food today. That's interesting. Why would they give
Joe
advertising?
has had tremendous scandals, I know, with regard to
Here, we'll tell you one thing about it. We're not doing-
and the farmer end of things.
That's small thing.
Yeah, that's a whole different thing. right?
Yeah, that was a while ago, but I remember Joe was the focus of that kind of thing. So,
All right, all y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
where is Texas State?
San Marcos, Texas.
Basically-
It's 30 minutes outside Austin.
Yeah, so about the center of the state, just a little bit
Yeah.
I
down.
bet Austin's a great.
Austin's a great.
It's pretty nice,
Yeah.
yeah.
We're having fun up here,
Yeah.
appreciating the cooler weather.
Okay.
Here's y'all's time for that.
Oh, thank you. All right.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Those bags are over there.
Over there.